was turned that way.
Okay, so you know what's interesting about a squid eye? Is a squid eye is very similar to a human eye. Now think about the evolutionary tree. Where's the squid and where's the human? Well, the human's supposed to be up here, right? Where would the squid be? Down here somewhere, right? So they say that those wouldn't be related to each other, and yet they have very similar eyes. How hard would it be for an eye to evolve in the first place?
Very hard.
It would be impossible. Matter of fact, the story they tell is that there was a light-sensitive patch of skin, and that eventually it became more and more sensitive to light, and then it became more and more sensitive to light, and eventually it started to move into the correct place, and it actually became the eye, with all the optic nerves and how the brain interfaces and all of that stuff. Matter of fact, Darwin said, can you imagine how impossible it would be for an eye to form? But then he goes on and talks about how he believes it actually did form, okay? So to form an eye would be impossible. But what they believe is since a squid is down here and a human's down here, that similar eye had to evolve twice. I want you to understand what they're saying. That is 2 times impossible. Did you get it? It's very impossible. So here's what they're saying, and listen to the circular reasoning. Similar structures on similar creatures prove evolution. But evolution proves that there's creatures with similar structures. Do you see the circular reasoning? But then they would say, but when there's 2 completely unrelated animals that have a similar structures on different creatures means that evolution happened more than once. Do you get what they're saying? Do you see the problem with the logic there? How do we as Christians explain that a squid and humans have a similar eye? What does it point to? Is it a common ancestor? It's a common designer. Listen, when we think about wheels, we use them on skateboards and bicycles and jet airplanes and cars, right? We use our intelligence and we use a similar structure for different things, right? So when God created, God just used similar structures. And sometimes he put it on animals that are kind of similar, but sometimes he put similar structures on animals that are completely different, right? So from a creationist perspective, we don't have a problem with similar structures. Okay, a couple more and we're done. Okay, extinction. There's another big thing that they teach in this book. Until recently, researchers looked for a single cause for mass extinction. Many mass extinctions, however, were probably caused by several factors working in combination. Volcanic eruptions, moving continents, and changing sea levels. By the way, an article just came out in another scientific journal about 2 months ago that showed that they no longer believe that the asteroid killed the dinosaurs. You know why? The dinosaurs died out at the wrong time for that to happen, according to their... So they've just thrown that one out the window, okay? But here's a couple things I want you to notice. First is, they don't know what caused the extinctions. But generally, it was volcanic eruptions, moving continents, and changing sea levels. Okay, that's great, but let me ask you from a creationist worldview, what event in the Bible would we see volcanic eruptions, moving continents, and changing sea levels? The flood. Exactly, the worldwide flood. Think of what would be going on during a worldwide flood, right? Would there be tsunamis? Yeah. Would there be earthquakes? Yeah. You know what? We found lots of volcanic ash in layers that are very clearly flood layers. Flood layers are found all around the globe. Okay? Look at these dinosaur graveyards. This is Dinosaur National Monument. Look at how all these bones are just jumbled together. Matter of fact, I just got back from one of my favorite places on planet Earth. My wife and I wrote a book a long time ago called Jonathan Park. And we did a radio show called Jonathan Park. And in that book, we talked about dinosaur graveyards. And the one we talked about the most was Ghost Ranch. And I got to go to Ghost Ranch only like 2 weeks ago. I was actually there at Ghost Ranch. And when you go inside their museum, they've got this huge chunk of sediment. And inside that chunk of sediment, you see skulls and claws and backbones and tails and feet and fangs and all that stuff. It looks like you put hundreds of dinosaurs in a blender and then poured it out into this chunk of sediment. And when I asked the paleontologist that's there, how did these dinosaurs die, they said it was a local flash flood. Here's the problem. Those dinosaurs are found in the Shinli Formation. And that formation stretches over hundreds of thousands of square miles. As a matter of fact, when we were at the dinosaur graveyard, we started driving and we kept seeing the Shinle Formation stretching over several states. As a matter of fact, when you go to every dinosaur graveyard in the United States, you know what they say? I did a research project on this. Here's what the evolutionist says. Ancient riverbed, ancient sea, mudstone, everything at their sites says that these dinosaurs were killed by water. Now these guys want to figure out what killed the dinosaurs, right? So they all jump on their airplanes and they fly to their meetings and they sit around and go, what killed the dinosaurs? Maybe it was climate change. Oh, maybe it was the asteroid. Maybe it was a lack of food. So they're trying to figure this out, right? But then they all jump on the planes and fly back to their individual graveyard, and it's water, 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 water. Now, we also studied Europe. The European dinosaur graveyard's the same thing. And then we looked at China, same thing. Now, in these dinosaur graveyards, they find mammals, lungfish, birds, crocodiles, salamanders, and dinosaurs all jumbled together in this mess. In fact, in this particular site, there are more marine fossils than there are dinosaurs. Let me ask you something. What kind of event would it take to pull the birds from the air, the ocean-dwelling creatures and the land-dwelling creatures, and mix them all together, slam them down, and fossilize them instantly? It totally fits exactly with the worldwide flood, right? Genesis, so he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping thing, and bird of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive. Okay, that's actually all I've got. Why creation? I think we started off by talking about that. Listen, this is important stuff. You guys have got to know why you believe what you believe. When I meet a Christian, a lot of times I'll say, how do you know what you believe is true? Most Christians can't answer that. Listen, I want you to have an apologetic for your faith. I want you to know why you believe what you believe. That way, when you end up in college class someday and they're teaching evolution, I want you to stand firm on God's word and know that it's true. One last thing I'll say, and then we're going to do Q&A. I want you to think about... Brian Lucas, did you write this?
No. I do own that one.
No, I'm just kidding, because I actually know the author personally.
Jesus, Jude.
Okay. Here's something that we take for granted. Think about this. Every religion in the world teaches things that are not true. But all God calls us to believe is what is true. Think how hard it would be if you were part of a religion where you looked and the evidence didn't line up and you just had to believe it anyway. I'm not going to mention the religion, but there's one main religion that has another book that teaches all about all these incredible wars and people groups and all that stuff that were warring down in South America. Do you realize that there's no archaeological evidence for that? And yet the scriptures, when it talks about all the different kings and all the different cities and places, we can find incredible archaeological evidence for that. In fact, you've got a video for that back there, don't you? Patterns of Evidence, incredible documentary. That is an amazing documentary. So listen how cool it is as Christians. God doesn't call us to believe a bunch of baloney. He just says, believe what's true. You know what that means? Most Christians are walking around like this, by the way. Don't show me the evidence. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. You know what we can do as Christians is we can go, show me the evidence. Isn't that awesome? Isn't it great that God says just believe what's true? It'd be a real bummer if we had to believe a bunch of religious mumbo-jumbo that really wasn't true. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have got like half an hour for Q&A. I want to give my disclaimer. I am not a scientist. I've worked with hundreds of scientists. I've done lots of documentaries. I have literally done thousands and thousands of interviews where I've talked to different scientists. So when you ask me a question, instead of giving you my answer, I'm going to search my database in my head, and I'm going to find an answer from a scientist that I've been given, and I'm going to try and repeat back to you what I've learned from a scientist. But the reason I tell you that is because some of you may ask me the stumper, right? If you ask me the stumper, I'm going to tell you that it's the stumper, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know, but then I'll give you my email and say, I'll find out, and I'll email it to you, okay? The fun thing is I have contact with hundreds of creation scientists. By the way, people all the time say, well, there's no Christians that are real scientists. So you know that's a bunch of baloney? I've got a database full of hundreds and hundreds of scientists. And a lot of them used to be evolutionists who began to realize that evolution was a bunch of baloney, and they became creationists, okay? So it's not true. There's a lot of PhD creation scientists that are out there, okay? So you guys understand the rules with the questions, right? You may stump me, and if you stump me, you can go ahead and make fun of me or whatever you want to do, and I'll just tell you, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that one, okay? Questions? Yes?
Where do the dinosaurs fit into the Bible?
I'm so glad you asked.
What was the question?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Brian said, when they ask a question, repeat the question. And I already failed. How do dinosaurs fit into the Bible? Okay, so according to the scriptures, when were land animals created? Anybody know what day of creation?
Is it day 3?
No.
Okay.
No?
5 or 6.
You're getting closer. Yes, bingo. Who said 6? Yes.
Same day that humans were created.
Same day as humans. Okay, if you tell an evolutionist that humans and man live together, they go, you gotta be kidding me! But the Bible says it, right? So I know it's true. So usually the first objection somebody says is, wait a minute, dinosaurs and man living together? Dinosaurs would rip them to pieces, right? Okay? Well, listen, are there other wild animals out there? Does anybody hang out with wild tigers or lions or crocodiles?
Only
Oh.
Mowgli.
Okay, so there are a few of you that do. Okay, you actually do. Okay, listen, when I see a dangerous animal, you know what I do? Is I usually stay away from them, okay? So listen, man probably wasn't just hanging out with the dinosaurs. But now here's the crazy thing. Accounts in civilizations all around the world write dragon legends. And when they describe dragons, it's amazing how similar they sound to dinosaurs. Now, some of them are obviously fiction. But there are some that are written like they're a historical narrative where they talk about dragons. And you look at that and you go, well, that's really interesting. Now, the other thing that's also interesting is you can travel to different places around the world and find artifacts where it seems like the artist was trying to make a dragon. Well, how did they know what dinosaurs looked like? We didn't rediscover dinosaurs until the 1800s. Okay? So could it be that man really did dwell with dinosaurs? Okay, and could it be that that's kind of the foundation for dragon legends? And then in the 1800s, we came up with the name dinosaurs, right? And that's when we first began to rediscover their fossils and all of that type of stuff. So that's all interesting conjecture, right? But according to the Bible, we know that they existed with man. Now, here's some other interesting things. Was back not so many years, Dr. Mary Schweitzer is an interesting woman. She's a paleontologist. She used to be a housewife. One day she decided to be a paleontologist, and she's like one of the best paleontologists ever, and she's a dinosaur paleontologist. She's also a Christian, but she's also an evolutionist. And when you talk to her about it, she says you've got to keep your Christian faith in one hand and evolution in the other, and you should never combine them. Okay, so she is a fully committed evolutionist. But one time, when they were working on one of the dinosaur skeletons, they found red blood cells inside one of the dinosaur long bones, okay? And the leg bone there. They cracked it open and they found what they thought was red blood cells. Well, now at the time, I remember hearing that discovery and I thought it was amazing. And I went, wow, if they found red blood cells, this is going to be like nationwide news. So I started looking everywhere and I only found the article in one magazine. And I'm a radio producer, so I said, wow, I want to do a story on this, a nationwide story, but I said, I can't do it based on it just being in one newspaper magazine. And I was so bummed out because I said, man, this is a huge discovery. And one day I was in the shower where all good ideas come from. Yeah, I wasn't singing, fortunately. But I had the idea, why don't I just call Dr. Schweitzer? And so I actually called her lab, and I actually ended up talking to one of her lab techs, and I asked the guy, did you find red blood cells in the leg bone of the dinosaur? And he goes, I think we did. I said, well, isn't that amazing? Isn't that like the most amazing discovery ever? And the guy said, yeah. I said, well, what are you doing with it now? And he goes, well, we don't talk about it much anymore. You know what's crazy is a few years later, Dr. Schweitzer found another one. I wish I had the video to show you. She was on a news broadcast. They found another one. They had to crack this bone, this T-Rex bone, to get it into the helicopter. And when they did, they found stretchy blood vessels, soft tissues inside. Well, you know what's amazing is she worked with Dr. Jack Horner, who's probably the best known dinosaur paleontologist on Earth right now. And he said, Dr. Schweitzer, I want you to check some of the other dinosaurs you found. And she started cracking open some of the hadrosaur fossils that they discovered and found soft tissues in that. Now, since that time, somebody else found other soft tissue in another dinosaur, and then only a few weeks ago was another announcement about another one. What's cool is they keep finding these stretchy tissues inside the dinosaurs. Well, how long could DNA, stretchy tissues, and red blood cells last in a dinosaur bone? Matter of fact, the original one that she found wasn't even fossilized yet. How could a bone exist for 68, 70 million years if it wasn't fossilized? How would it exist without decaying? Further, it existed that long and never became fossilized. And then last of all, isn't it amazing that you've got all the soft tissue inside of that? You know, they were amazed. Matter of fact, Dr. Schweitzer on the broadcast, I wish I could show it to you, basically said we're going to have to rewrite the books on this one. We don't understand how this works. And so instead of questioning how long ago those dinosaurs lived, instead they tried to figure out how DNA and tissue could last that long, right? But as they keep finding this stuff, it shows me over and over again that the dinosaurs existed not too long ago. It probably existed with man. That's probably where the dragon legends came from. Okay, so I've given you a super long answer. So here's the whole deal. Created on day 6, lived with man, flood happened, okay? Everyone that didn't go on the ark was killed off. We see dinosaur graveyards all around the world, hundreds of them slammed down, killed, fossilized instantly. But we know that there's probably a few who made it to the flood, because not too long after that, Job lived, and Job 40 and 41 talks about Leviathan and Behemoth. And when you look at those, they look like descriptions of dinosaurs, and probably after that, they just eventually went extinct. So there's my answer. Is that clarified? Is that... Okay, if anybody else asks a question, I'll try really hard not to do like half an hour of answering.
No, it's cool. Next time, can you just be thorough?
Oh, yeah. Can't
Awesome.
turn it off, sorry. Yes.
Why weren't the dinosaurs on the ark?
No, I think they were, because we've got Job who lived after the flood, and he actually talks about Behemoth and Leviathan. Okay, now, how smart is God? Did God like bring in the full-grown T-Rex? By the way, a lot of people have studied this. They've figured out, by the way, how many species would need to be on the ark. Okay? So all the animals that we know of that are alive today, all the animals that we know of that have gone extinct, and then trying to figure out the different kinds. Remember, the kinds show variety. So you don't have to bring all the dogs, right? You only have to bring the dog kind. So somebody has figured out how many species would need to be on the ark. And here's what they figured out, is that about 1/3 of the ark would have been taken up with the animals to get back to the animals that we know of today and the ones that went extinct. And a lot of people have done that study, have shown that probably most animals probably had the ability to hibernate. Okay, so some animals hibernate naturally, but a lot of animals actually can go into a hibernation when needed, and it could be that God just allowed a lot of those to hibernate. Okay, I know my answers are very long here. I just went back to the Ark encounter back in Kentucky. Have you guys heard about that? Yes. They built a full-size Noah's Ark. And I got to go in there before they opened it, and it was cool. Me and my family got to go up the ramp and inside the Ark, and there was nobody else in there except for a few workers. It was the day before opening day, and there's still workmen cutting on the wood and stuff. It was funny. They were working on it all the way up to the very moment that that thing opened up. But I went inside the Ark, and there's 3 decks. And I went in the first one, and I looked from that end to that end. And this is not scientific, understand. But I looked at all the cages they had, and I already know in my mind that they've worked it out to 1/3 of the deck was taken up by the animals. And I looked at all the cages, and I looked at the size, and I said, could I believe that all the species of animals could fit on here? You know what my impression was? Again, this isn't scientific. Just sitting there, looking at how large it is inside there, I went, yeah, I feel like that could be possible. Here's the other thing I did was, there was 8 people on the Ark, right? And so if there's 3 decks, if they're going to take care of the animals, each person would have to take care of less than half a deck. So here's the other thing I did, is I stood and looked at just one end, and they've got it all set up. It's pretty cool, so that all the poop falls through the cages down below, okay, on the deck below. And they've also got water delivery systems set up, and they've also got food delivery systems. And I looked at half the deck, and I've done a lot of manual labor in my life, and I looked and I said, could I make it around to scoop all the poop, deliver all the water, and deliver all the food to this half of the deck? And my answer was, yeah, I think it's possible. It's doable. Standing there, it felt like it was possible. And again, that's not scientific. That's just how I felt when I was standing there. Okay, long answers again. Every question gets a free lecture. Yes?
Can you disprove carbon dating?
Can I disprove carbon dating?
Didn't the video do that?
Well, now are you talking about carbon dating or radioisotope dating? Because
Carbon dating, where you take a piece of it, destroy it.
yes, okay, so carbon dating is only good to about 47,000 years, okay, because by then the half-lives, it's decayed all the way by 47,000 years, okay? So when you're talking about the millions of years, they don't even use carbon dating for the millions of years. So keep in mind that the radioisotope dating, like the rock dating, is what they use for dating the millions of years for rocks. Now, carbon dating has got some problems of its own. It seems like it's accurate back to a certain point, but then scientists actually use a correction factor on it, okay? And so when it comes down to it, from what I understand, you can use carbon dating to a certain point, and then it begins to get to the point where it's unreliable. And again, that's not the method that they're using for the millions of years, because at that point you've got to switch over to the radioisotope dating that we were talking about in rocks. And I've got to tell you, they've shown over and over again that that doesn't work. Matter of fact, if you want information on why it doesn't work, there was a project that was done by the Institute for Creation Research about 10 or 12 years ago called RATE. And if you type RATE into a search engine, matter of fact, if you go to icr.org and type in RATE, it will give you a whole bunch of data that they found during their research project. Yes, sir.
What takes more faith, creation or science?
Oh,
Evolution.
I'm going to change that question up. Because it's not creation versus science, right? I like to put it this way. It's evolutionary religion or creation. It's evolutionary science or creation science. Okay, so which takes more faith? Well, my contention would be, just like the commercial I showed you, I got to help write that script. You know, in my opinion, there's so many things that they've got to believe in faith. They've got to believe that nothing became everything. They've got to believe that gas clouds, all the stuff that the woman... So listen, when an evolutionist walks up to me and says, man, I don't have the faith that you have, I say, oh, brother, you got more than I do. Because you believe all those things. And then I say, what do I believe? I believe that the design we see in the world points to a designer. Which is more scientific? The design points to a designer, or the design points to a bunch of random chance accidents that break a bunch of scientific laws? I would say evolutionary religion takes much more faith than just being a creationist.
So the meteor shower with the whole dinosaur thing and the whole meteor shower, how did that work with like people living with dinosaurs?
Okay, so the evolutionary theory used to be a popular one. Now understand, they've got about 150 different extinction theories for the dinosaurs, okay? So the one that was very popular was that there was a meteorite that impacted the Earth. Well, how did that kill the dinosaurs? Well, there was a bunch of different variations of that too, right? It caused so much dust and all this stuff. And then you got to ask the question, well, why did it just kill off some animals and not all of them, right? So there were some problems for that, okay? But just about 2 months ago, they came out with a new scientific journal. They published in a journal saying that they don't even believe that that impact is timed with the mass extinction of the dinosaurs anymore. So they literally have thrown that theory out the window as of about 2 months ago. Okay? So that's their theory. Again, what the creationists would say is that what killed most of the dinosaurs was the worldwide flood. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Several years ago, I heard something about when granite is formed, it releases gas bubbles, and that scientists have found that all of the granite on the planet has the gas bubbles trapped. which tells them that it was formed instantaneously. Do you have any?
Okay, so I think what you're referring to is they've discovered helium trapped in diamonds. Okay, and diamonds are a very hard substance, but helium is a very slippery gas. And according to the age that they believe diamonds are, there's no way you should find helium in there. And yet we still find diamonds with helium inside. And so it shows that there's no way that those diamonds could be the billions of years that they actually say diamonds are. Now, with granite, that's one of the rocks that they used when they did the rate experiment to measure the radioactive decay that was going on there. So that's what the deal is with granite, is that's a great rock to use when you're doing the radioisotope dating. And again, the rate team used granite for part of their experiments and all of that. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, again, if you go to icr.org and type in rate, and then probably even granite, you'll see some articles that come up specifically about that. Yes?
Wouldn't aquatic animals survive the flood?
Yeah, isn't that the cool thing is Noah didn't have to take all the aquatic animals on there, right?
Then wouldn't there be like aquatic dinosaurs?
Yes, you're right. So we find those in the fossil record, right? And so the cool thing is Noah wouldn't have to take those on the ark, and probably what was going on is, imagine you've got fresh water, you've got salt water, and you've got this catastrophe going on, and you would see probably most of the animals being killed out, but a few of them survived, maybe in pockets of fresh water that was swirling around, and pockets of salt water, and pockets of brackish water, right? And so these creatures survived until after the flood. And in fact, when we look in the fossil record, I believe it's 90% of the fossil record are marine creatures. In fact, we find shells on all the tallest mountains all around the world. Is that cool? So what an evolutionist have to say, there goes my long form answer again, is they would have to say that there's a lot of local floods, right? Because we find shells on mountains all around the world. They would say there was floods and then there was uplift and all that stuff. Well, what's interesting is they say local flood, local flood, local flood, local flood, but yet the layers that you see actually stretch over sometimes entire continents and onto other continents. So does that sound like it's a local flood? No, it actually sounds like a global event, right?
Well, the state fossil here in Nevada is a ichthyosaurus.
Okay, right.
So when, I don't know if you know your geography well, but we're not exactly a coastline state.
By the way,
Yeah, and the park's east of here. The state park for it is past Elko.
okay, and they actually found one of those fossils giving birth and captured in the fossil record giving birth. How fast would that have to happen? You're talking about fossilized, right? I mean, matter of fact, there's another fossil that they find that's of a fish, and you see another fish sticking out of his mouth. And forever I've heard that was described that the one fish was eating the other fish and got caught. Well, I've actually talked to Dr. Franklin, who's a fossil expert who lives in my area, and he's written for all kinds of scientific journals. And he said what was more likely was he had already swallowed the fish, and then all the pressure from the flood was pushing that fish out just as he was fossilized. So, pretty interesting. Yes?
So do creationists believe the Big Bang and creation are the same thing?
No, not at all. Matter of fact, a lot of Christians say that. Maybe the Genesis account is just the story of the Big Bang happening. But the problem is when you look at the Big Bang, it's in a completely different order from the account of creation. In the Big Bang, there was superheated gas clouds that eventually collapsed and became the stars. And then eventually, around those stars, debris collided, creating planets. Okay, and then eventually on that planet was water, and then you've got life forming, crawling out, and then eventually plants and all of that, right? But what does the Bible say? The Bible says that the earth came before the sun, moon, and stars. Okay, so you've got the earth preceding the sun, moon, and stars. You've got plants preceding the sun. Okay, so when you look at the two orders of Genesis and the Big Bang, they're totally out of order with each other. Now, again, I'll give you a different answer. You know, could God have used the Big Bang? He could have if he wanted to. However, there are so many scientific problems for the Big Bang. There are just major problems with the Big Bang. So the question is, why are we trying to stick the Big Bang into the Bible? Why don't we just say if the science doesn't demand it, and if the Bible doesn't talk about it, we shouldn't bring them together. That would be my answer to that.
So, evolutionists believe that the world was covered by water for an extended period of time. How does that fit into the Bible?
How does that fit into the Bible? How does the evolutionary view fit into the Bible?
Yeah, kind of. Because weren't there like a lot of weird water creatures, I guess? I don't know, like shell type ones?
There are lots of crazy creatures. Matter of fact,
Yeah.
there still are, right? By the way, there was the census of marine life that was done in 2010, and they found hundreds of crazy creatures that we had never even heard of before. So listen, I think the ocean is teeming with stuff that we haven't even discovered yet. So you're right, there are lots of crazy creatures. So I guess the two questions are, did those evolve, or were those things that God created on the fifth day of creation? So my answer would be created by God on the fifth day. So I don't know if I'm answering what you're asking.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not.
Kind of. Yeah.
So how does the evolutionary idea of the oceans and
yeah.
how do the creation views of the oceans, how do they integrate? I'd say, well, probably they don't. I mean, the two models are totally different from each other. One says that things slowly came about by natural processes over billions of years. The other one says that God spoke and it was created.
What about Pangea?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. In the Bible, when it says on day 4, it created the waters and then the land was gathered together in one place. It actually sounds like biblically that there was actually one landmass. Now, here's what's really interesting is that we're taught in school that plate tectonics happens very slowly over millions and millions of years. The guy who wrote the software, which is called Terra, that they used to use for modeling plate tectonics, the guy who wrote that software is a guy by the name of Dr. John Baumgartner. Dr. Baumgartner is a younger creationist who created that software to model plate tectonics happening during the worldwide flood. What's so funny is he's a biblical creationist who was trying to model the flood, but his software was so good that geophysicists all around the world used his software for many, many years. In fact, there was a Time article that was written that said, how can this guy be so smart that we all use his software, but so stupid that he believed that God was the one who created it all? Here's what he believes. He and a team have worked on this for many years. They've modeled this in several different ways. Think about this. If there was one landmass at the start of the flood, and if one of those plates began to break, okay, basically what they believe, here's what he and his team, now this is just a theory, okay? This is not, thus saith the Lord your God. This is just man's idea. If you take one plate and start it moving, and it starts to subduct, as it begins to subduct, it creates a lot of heat. That heat changes the viscosity, and that plate starts to plunge even faster. As it starts to plunge into the earth, okay, you've got magma that's coming up. It's starting to spread the plates, okay, and that's starting to happen very fast. Dr. Baumgartner contends that that could happen during the 1 year of the flood to get from one landmass to where they are today. Now listen, as this is starting to spread, as superheated materials coming up and meeting the cold ocean water, it's creating these super steam plumes because of the hot material and the cold water. You know what that's doing is it's releasing lots of water up into the atmosphere to return back as rain. Okay? So this model that they've put together of the flood explains plate tectonics, and it also explains a mechanism for all the water from the flood. By the way, in Genesis 7:11, it says the fountains of the great deep were broken up. Okay? So I was thinking the rain coming down as rain, but could it be that we have these superheated steam plumes that are coming from the fountains of the great deep and creating all the moisture and the water that we need to flood the earth?
Science, man. Love it.
Yeah.
All right, we got 5 more minutes. Does anybody else have any other questions? I have talked you out. I would like to finish with an exposition through the book of Leviticus. May I?
By all means.
Oh, yes, one more question.
Only if you
What-
speak
what-
in Shakespearean English.
I saw that Shanahan was taking Bill Nye the Science Guy through the art experience, and that in the process they were answering questions for people, and somebody would ask Bill Nye, like, well, then where did this all, what was the creator? And he basically, he couldn't come up with a God, but he basically said Martians might have done it now.
Oh, did Bill Nye say that? I don't.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, it was just incredible watching it going, wait, you don't want to have a God, but you're willing to call out Martians now.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, one of the most famous evolutionists alive nowadays is Dr. Richard Dawkins. Did you guys see the movie Expelled? It's like my favorite documentary. I love Ben Stein because he just has this way of asking questions. It's like the Columbo way. He asks these questions and people just answer them, right? So he asked Dr. Dawkins that. He said, how did non-living materials become alive? And Dr. Dawkins says, well, we don't know. And he goes, well, give me your best guess. He goes, well, we don't know. He goes, well, no, just give me your best guess. And Dr. Dawkins on that documentary says, well, we could suppose maybe that it was planted here by other beings.
But where did they come from?
That is like my favorite piece of video in the entire universe. Dr. Doc, and what Stein says after that is he looks into the camera and goes, wow, Dawkins actually does believe in a creator, just not the one from the Bible. And when you think about it, it's true, right? Where did life come from? Aliens brought it. Well, where did they come from? Other aliens brought them. Eventually, where's the answer, right?
Yeah.
So here you've got one of the best known evolutionists in the world giving an answer to that. By the way, that is the one question that I find that they cannot answer. Whenever I'm in a debate, I always ask that question. How did non-living materials become alive? They have to really dance around to try and answer that one. All right, can I pray for you guys?
Yes.
Listen, I hope that you stand strong. If you have other questions that you want to ask, can I just hang out for a few minutes after we excuse?
Absolutely.
Okay. I invite you to take any of the DVDs. Just go for it. There's a student guide that goes along with it if you want to. Also, we've got the wristbands. I forgot to wear my wristband. Yeah, the wristbands. If you go there, you can watch all the videos for free. Also, we've got lots of stuff you can download. Listen, my prayer for you right now is going to be that you're not going to be one of those students who rejects their faith later on. Here's the challenge I want to make for you. I guarantee somebody's going to bring you something where you don't know how to answer it. You're going to be stumped. I think God allows us to go through a crisis of faith sometimes, so we have to search deeper into His Word to find the answer. I guarantee you that you are sometime going to be confronted with something where you go, oh my gosh, I don't know how that fits with my faith. Instead of throwing your faith away, I want to challenge you to look for the answer. Because if you look for the answer, I'm sure that you can find it. Okay? And also, if you've got the wristband, you can always contact us and write us an email. If you're in school, as school starts up again, and the teacher throws out the one thing that you cannot answer, feel free to email me, and I will try and find some research to answer the question you have, okay? So do not be one of those people that reject your faith. Hang on to it, okay? Also, last thing, and then I'll pray. I'm sorry, I keep thinking of new things, but I think this is important too. Listen, at your age, a lot of you are living your parents' faith. A lot of you are Christians because your parents are Christians. Here's my challenge to you. Is it really your faith? Do you really believe this stuff? Listen, if it's just your parents' faith, you're probably not going to survive very long. So how do you make it your faith? Is this real to you? Do you really believe this? And if it's not your faith and it's your parents' faith, I encourage you to make it your faith. Okay, I'm going to pray for you. Dear Father, thank you for these students. And God, I thank you for this 2 hours that we've had together. God, I thank you for their patience and that they've listened so well. God, I just pray that you would keep each one of these students strong. Father, I pray that when they're faced with a question that they don't know how to ask, Father, instead of giving up on their faith, Father, I pray that they would search and that they would wait on you to bring the answer, Father. God, I pray that no one in this class would be a statistic that rejects their faith. Father, instead, I pray that everybody in this youth group might be a warrior for you, Father. God, I pray that they would serve you all of the days of their life. And God, I pray that you would help them also to stand up for their faith. God, help them to be warriors for you. I just pray these things in the name of your son Jesus. Amen. All right,
Hey
thanks,
guys, just a reminder, if you ordered a DVD about Egypt and some of the archaeology stuff that Steve talked about last time, go see Steve. He's got some of those. If you didn't,